The Tragedy of the Skywalkers, or what the first 6 Star Wars movies owe to ancient Greece. As far as the dramatic template of Star Wars is concerned, we all know that Star Wars drew heavily from the monomyth, that is, the hero's journey, which is a thing in comparative mythology, since almost all cultures have some version of it. The hero's journey can be summed up as the mythological narrative that surrounds the coming-of-age process of an adolescent who leaves youth behind in order to come into his own and join ranks with the adults. The original trilogy is Luke Skywalker's hero's journey, but what is less often acknowledged is that besides the monomyth, Star Wars also draws upon another art form, one that's usually associated with high culture and which is exceedingly hard to pull off in blockbuster entertainment. That form is ancient Greek tragedy. In summarizing the nature of tragedy, we can do no better than follow the lead of Edith Hall, professor of classics at King's College London. As she would have it, more than any other art form, Greek tragedy does one thing in particular, and that is to look suffering directly in the face. It can't stare it down, but it stares at it, and no other art form is so unflinching about it. Suffering, you say? At the end of Empire, Luke has lost a hand and been revealed to be the son of an abhorrent murderer. Han has been put into carbon freeze, not knowing whether he will survive, and Leia doesn't know whether she will ever see the man she loves again. Luke is so broken that he tried to give up his own life by plunging himself down the abyss after being defeated by Vader. He had lost all will to live. Empire looks suffering in the eye the way tragedy does. The tragic components must have come as a shock for audiences at the time, who had no other frame for Star Wars but the giddy and optimistic A New Hope. Hope is a fairy tale, but Empire is a tragedy, wrapped in science fiction fantasy garb. Rather than the joyous elevation we felt from watching Hope, Empire ends on somber notes of pity for the main characters, and a sense of fearful foreboding for what is to come. Exactly the emotions that tragedy is supposed to evoke in us. But before returning to Empire, let us first take a step back and look at the broader story of the first 6 Star Wars movies. The political narrative of the first 2 trilogies revolves around a republic, a fragile but morally upright form of government, which is threatened by simpler, more dictatorial forms of rule. As in the case of Aeschylus's tragedy, The Persians, a democratic republic is contrasted with the threat of imperial rule by a few power-hungry individuals whose motivations are fundamentally different from the people they seek to govern. Imperial rule is also characterized by hubris and seen as a form of government where all are slaves but the emperor himself. In Star Wars, the construction of the Death Star constitutes one giant divulgence that the Empire rules through fear. Hunger for power is exemplified by the dark side, hubris encapsulated by the Emperor's overconfident plan in Jedi, which ultimately caused his own demise, and slavery represented by the plethora of Imperial officers who are executed at the whims of their masters. To elaborate on this last theme further, Vader's dependence on his life support system, as well as his admonition that he must obey his master, also speaks to themes of bondage and involuntary servitude. Virgil's works speak of the blessed-born child who is going to restore the Golden Age, that is, an era of peace and moral uprightness. In Star Wars, Qui-Gon asks Obi-Wan to look after Anakin, saying, "He is the chosen one. He will bring balance. Train him." But in Greek tragedies, being blessed-born does not always turn out to be as breezy as one could imagine. Not only does it foster hubris, it also means that the gods have some special twist of fate planned for the main character. And in Greek tragedy, the gods often decide to teach wisdom through suffering. That is to say, being the chosen one is no guarantee bad things won't happen. Anakin is, of course, the chosen one who goes bad. He was raised by his mother and didn't know his father. This is another common theme in Greek stories, and often supplemented by the kicker that the father is a god, as was the case with Hercules and Perseus. In other cases, the story is even closer to Star Wars, such as when a child of special lineage, such as Oedipus or Ion, is raised by ordinary people who turn out not to be his parents. Both Anakin and Luke are, in fact, chosen ones, whose fathers are not ordinary men. Particularly in Luke's case, the revelation that his father is Darth Vader is akin to the curse of the gods, or mark of destiny often bestowed on the main character of Greek tragedies. And the parallels to Oedipus are especially strong here. Referencing Hall again, one of the key themes of tragedy is the setup, the error of judgment that leads the main character to make bad decisions that in turn affect terrible results. A sympathetic person whom it's easy for the audience to identify with misjudges the situation at hand, often for a good reason, and catastrophe ensues. As in the case with Oedipus, Luke goes out into the world in order to right a moral wrong. His intentions are noble and his heart is pure, yet he nevertheless ends up causing more trouble than he abates. The plot of a tragedy exists in a state of tension between the hero's error of judgment and the catastrophe that results from it. The retribution for the hero's tragic error is typically brought about by some collusion of exterior forces, such as fate, chance, ignorance, and necessity, which work in conjunction with the hero's mistake to bring about his downfall. Another thing that characterizes tragedy is that the retribution should be much more severe, in fact, out of proportion to the hero's initial misstep. Luke's willingness to confront Vader in the service of saving his friends and in defiance of the admonitions of Obi-Wan and Yoda constitutes his tragic flaw. By itself, his motivation is commendable, and the blunder is slight when compared to the immense misfortunes that Luke must undergo because of it. Luke's eagerness to do the right thing constitutes his hubris. His zeal turns out to be a flaw when it comes into contact with the twist of fate that the gods, that is, the Force, had in store for him. At the point in time when Luke made the decision to go save his friends, there was no other way he could have known the truth about his lineage. Thus, when Vader says, "I am your father," the final blow of misfortune is heaped upon Luke's already battered condition. It's a perfect illustration of how tragic retribution, brought about by forces outside of the hero's control, is out of proportion to the initial mistake. Thus, tragedy shows us that people can suffer while seemingly not deserving to suffer. And if the hero is relatable, we, in turn, relate his misfortune to our own lives. We understand that, though we aim to do most things right, we inevitably end up facing adversity and difficult situations in life. Hence, the goal of tragedy is not suffering, but reflection on the human condition. By seeing someone else undergo a tragic endeavor, we intuitively understand that our power to always get the outcomes we want in life is limited, and that this is what it's like to be human. Witnessing someone who is fundamentally good but liable to human error undergo the tragic experience, we understand that these conditions apply to our life too. We see that our place in this vast universe is slight, and by seeing that, we are released from the tyranny of anxiety and self-blame, stifling emotions that it's common to undergo when things do not turn out the way we imagined in life. Our outlook on the human condition is enlarged, and we feel purged of the fearful states that are liable to impede us. We feel better able to go on and to face the hardships that inevitably lie in front of us. Filled with a bittersweet melancholy, we also experience a faint sense of hope at what is to come.
Luke, we're ready for takeoff.
Good luck, Mando. When we find Jabba the Hutt and that bounty hunter, we'll contact you.
I'll meet you at the rendezvous point on Tatooine.
Princess, we'll find Han. I promise.
Chewie, I'll be waiting for your signal. Take care, you two.
May the Force be with you.